What happens when an HOA thinks they're the law and they're smashing a homeowner's door in the dead of night, only to learn he's a retired Navy SEAL with brothers ready to fight back? Bang, bang, bang. The sound wasn't just loud, it was violent. The kind of pounding that makes the walls tremble and your chest tighten before you even know why. At 9:47 on a quiet Thursday night in Chesapeake, Virginia, Terrence McCall was sitting in his living room, still wearing his work shirt, a plate of leftovers cooling on the coffee table. His wife, Janine, had already gone upstairs to get ready for bed. Their teenage son was finishing homework in his room. Then the pounding came again. "Open up! You're in violation!" The words tore through the door like a threat, not the voice of a police officer, not the calm tone of a neighbor, but sharp, commanding, and angry. Terrence froze for a split second. Who pounds on someone's door like that in the middle of the night? He pushed his plate aside and stood up. Every instinct in his body screaming that something wasn't right. When he looked through the peephole, he didn't see police lights or uniforms. He saw 3 men, each wearing jackets marked with the Homeowners Association logo. The same logo printed on the newsletters that showed up in his mailbox every month. Except these men weren't holding clipboards. They weren't knocking. Politely, one of them already had a boot braced against the bottom of the door. "Sir, what's going on?" Terrence called out, his voice steady. "You're in violation," one of them barked. "Too many vehicles on your property. You've ignored citations. We're here to enforce compliance." Before Terrence could respond, the boot slammed forward. The door burst open with a crack that echoed through the house. "Janine!" screamed upstairs. Terrence's military instincts kicked in. He didn't lunge, he didn't panic. He planted his feet and stared the intruders down. "Step back," he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd given orders in war zones. "You don't belong in my house." But the men pushed further inside, their flashlights cutting across the living room walls. One of them pointed toward the window where Terrence's son's car was parked outside, next to his old pickup. "4 vehicles," the man snapped. "Regulation says 3. You were warned." Terrence clenched his jaw. He'd seen plenty of petty HOA warnings before. Grass too high, trash bins not pulled in quickly enough. But never had it come to this. Never had someone forced their way into his home. "Janine!" Terrence shouted toward the stairs. "Call the police!" The leader of the group whipped his flashlight toward Terrence. "Don't try anything. We have authority." "Authority?" Terrence stepped closer, squaring his shoulders. "This isn't authority. This is breaking and entering." For a moment the room was silent, except for Janine's voice on the phone upstairs, telling the dispatcher that men in HOA jackets had just smashed their way into her house. The men hesitated. They weren't used to being challenged. Usually, neighbors caved, paid the fine, moved the car, trimmed the grass. But Terrence wasn't blinking. His presence alone was enough to make them shift uneasily. "You've made a mistake," Terrence said, keeping his voice low but sharp. "You crossed the line." One of them tugged the sleeve of the leader's jacket, whispering something too quiet to catch. Finally, they backed toward the door. "This isn't over," the leader hissed. "You'll regret this." The door slammed behind them, leaving the living room in a tense silence. Terrence exhaled slowly. He could hear his son coming down the stairs wide-eyed. "Dad, who were they?" he asked. "Men who thought they could scare us," Terrence answered. "But they picked the wrong house." The smell of his dinner had gone cold. His door frame was splintered. His family was shaken, and in that moment Terrence knew. This wasn't just about cars in the driveway, it was about power. And the way some people abuse it when they think no one will push back. He sat back down, pulled his phone from his pocket, and scrolled through his contacts, until his eyes landed on a name he hadn't called in months. Ryan Keating, but before. Terrence could press call. Red and blue lights flashed across his blinds. The police had arrived, but instead of answers, their reaction would leave Terrence even more stunned. 2 Chesapeake police officers stepped onto the porch, one older with thinning hair under his cap, the other younger shifting his flashlight between the splintered wood and Terrence's face. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance," the older officer said, his tone measured, almost rehearsed. Terrence pointed directly at the door. The disturbance is right there. 3 men from the HOA broke into my house, forced the door open. My wife and son saw everything. The younger officer glanced at the broken frame, then at Terrence, then back at his partner. They said they were from the HOA. They weren't pretending, Terrence replied. They were wearing jackets with the logo, shouting about some car violation. Since when does an HOA have the right to kick down a door? Janine stepped into the living room, still clutching her phone. Her hands trembled. I told the dispatcher, these men barged in. They scared us half to death. We want to press charges. The officers exchanged a look. The first moment Terrence realized they weren't rushing to write anything down. No notepad, no quick radio call, just hesitation. Look, Mr. McCall, the older officer said carefully. These HOA folks sometimes get a little overzealous, but this might be more of a civil matter than a criminal one. Terrence's voice sharpened. Civil? My door is broken. They came into my house without permission. That's trespassing. Breaking and entering. Pick whichever crime fits. You mean to tell me if I did that to their house, I wouldn't be in handcuffs already? The room fell silent for a beat too long. Janine's eyes flashed with anger. They don't care, Dad. The younger officer cleared his throat. Do you have video? A doorbell cam? Anything we can use? Terrence shook his head. Not this time, but I've got witnesses. Right here. My wife. My son. That enough for you? The officers looked uneasy. The older one sighed, finally pulling out a small notepad. We'll make a report. But as far as charges go, you'll need to take this up with your HOA board. Maybe file a civil complaint in court. Terrence laughed bitterly, though there was no humor in it. So the message is clear. They can break into my home and you'll write it up like a noise complaint? Janine spoke up, her voice steadier now. You'd better document every detail, their faces, their jackets, the damage. If you don't, we will. The younger officer scribbled notes, avoiding Terrence's eyes. The older one finally looked directly at him. Sir, I understand you're upset, but let's keep things calm. We'll finish the report. You'll follow up with the HOA. Maybe get your lawyer involved. That's the system. Terrence stepped closer, not yelling, not waving his arms, but his words came out like commands. Officer, I've operated in combat zones where the rules of engagement were stricter than this. Men who break into a home should be arrested, not excused. Write it down properly. The officer swallowed hard, then nodded. When they finally left, Terrence locked what was left of the door and sat heavily in his chair. His son hovered nearby. Dad? The boy asked quietly. Are they really just gonna get away with it? Terrence stared at the cracked wood, his jaw tightening. Not for long. He grabbed his phone again and scrolled to Ryan Keating's name. This time he pressed call. The line clicked after 2 rings. A steady voice answered. Terrence. Been a while? Ryan, Terrence said, his tone low and deliberate. I need you. Tonight. 3 men forced their way into my house. HOA thugs in jackets, barking like they owned the place. Police won't do a thing. There was a pause on the line. Then the faint rustle of movement. You're serious? Dead serious. They're trying to intimidate me. They think I'm alone. Ryan's voice hardened. You're not. Where are you? Chesapeake. My family's here. I don't want them scared in their own home. Say no more, Ryan replied. I'll pull a few of the guys together. We'll meet tomorrow. You won't deal with this by yourself. Terrence leaned back, finally exhaling. Janine touched his shoulder, worry etched across her face. Are you sure about this? They brought force into our home, Terrence said. It's time they see what discipline looks like. The call ended. And for the first time that night, Terrence felt something shift. Not relief, but certainty. His brothers would stand with him. The next morning, they met at a diner on Portsmouth Boulevard. Ryan, Luis Ortega, Sam Coldwell, Elliot Tran, and Marcus Griffin. Men who had fought beside him. Men who knew what silence meant and what courage looked like. They listened. They planned. No violence, No threats, just presence, cameras rolling, discipline over chaos. That Saturday, they walked into the HOA office together. No shouting, no aggression, just truth. The board froze. The receptionist stared. The chairman stammered denials, but the video was already live, and the neighborhood was watching. By Sunday, neighbors were coming forward. Angela Price, the Dorseys, Jason Patel, each with their own story of fines, threats, fear. They had been silent for years. Now they found their voices. The HOA struck back with a defamation suit, $500,000 in damages. But Terrence didn't flinch. He hired a lawyer. Carla Whitman, sharp, uncompromising. She filed a criminal complaint. Then a civil suit, with testimonies, with evidence. The hearing came. In court, Angela's words cut deep. When they told me I'd lose my home if I didn't pay, I cried myself to sleep. But when I saw Terrence stand up, I realized we weren't alone. Terrence took the stand, calm, measured. I served this country overseas. I know what danger feels like. But I never thought my family would feel that fear, in our own home, because of neighbors who think rules give them power over people. Judge listened. The board's denials crumbled under proof, and when the cameras rolled outside the courthouse, Terrence didn't give a speech. Just a simple truth. This isn't just about me. It's about every family who's ever felt powerless against those who should serve, not dominate. Stand together and they can't break you. The crowd erupted. Neighbors hugged. Strangers held signs. No more HOA abuse. That night on the porch, Devin sat beside his father. So what happens now? Terrence leaned back. Now we wait. But win or lose, something already changed. People aren't afraid anymore. Janine rested her head on his shoulder. You gave people their voices back. Terrence shook his head. No, they already had voices. All I did was remind them how to use them. The neighborhood felt different. Kids played basketball without fear of fines. Yards looked lived in. People looked each other in the eye. When Ryan and the others left, he clasped Terrence's hand. You didn't need us to fight this battle. You had it in you all along. But I'm glad we stood with you. Terrence smiled faintly. So am I. When the last car pulled away, the street was quiet. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was peace. And for Terrence McCall, that was victory. Enough. This story is a reminder. Authority is only as strong as the people who allow it. When fear is replaced with unity, bullies lose their power. Never underestimate the strength of standing together.